The views discussed in this conversation are the views of individuals and not of Arrington Capital. This podcast is provided solely for informational purposes and is not financial, legal, tax, or investment advice. The participants of this podcast are not recommending any particular security, protocol, token, financial instrument, or other tradable asset or any investment strategy. It is not offering to sell or soliciting to buy any security or asset.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Pirate Pod, hosted by Arrington Capital. I'm Kelly Callahan. Super excited to be here today. Thiago from the Tanssi Foundation and Francisco from Moondance Labs have joined us. They had TGE and MainNet launch yesterday, so it's been a huge week for them. We're recording this a day after they did this major milestone. They've been working on it for a while. I can only imagine, actually, I know how exhausted you both must be at this point, and I'm super grateful that you're taking a few minutes to let us sort of capture your thoughts coming right out of the week that you've had. I'm going to make an attempt to summarize just to kick us off. I probably won't do this justice, so please feel free to fill in blanks. But your testnet, I think, had something like 3,000 app chains. It processed tens of millions of transactions. You had strong partnerships on the security front with Symbiotic. You had really strong exchange listings out of the gate, spot and perpetual trading on day one, leverage options on Binance. You had over 300 million in assets that were dedicated to securing the network yesterday when you launched. And you had tons of partners, especially in LATAM. You had a seamless airdrop, strong institutional support with just the focus that you have on compliance and deployment and your customized infrastructure. Super positive sentiment on social. Generally speaking, congratulations and really well done. How are you feeling about this, Francisco, today?
Yeah, man, after that introduction, and you're making me feel better about myself. Yeah, no, it was good. I mean, obviously stressful, high intensity. Launching a token is difficult. It's the culmination of like almost 3 years of work, right? So obviously there's a lot at stake, but the team worked well. We delivered, we executed on what we had to, and tokens live, mainnet is live, and this is kind of step one. Right now there's a marathon ahead of us, so we need to keep pushing for the years to come.
And Thiago, you've taken on the role of heading up the Tanssi Foundation, so a lot of this has been in your hands. I know the team's been busy building it. Tell us your take on launch yesterday.
Yeah, so to me, especially super excited moment. My first token launch, right? So a lot of lessons learned. I guess we're gonna talk a little bit about that today, but thank God I was with this super experienced team who already had launched a token in the past. So it makes things easier. It's never easy, but easier. A lot of pressure, a lot of stress, calls 2 a.m. in the morning, but that's all fun. And here we are, right?
Can we back up for those who don't know? I know, Francisco, you've been on the Pirate Pod before, and we've shared a lot of information about Tanssi off the Arrington handles. Can you give us a little bit of overview of what Tanssi is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the elevator pitch for Tanssi is that it's a protocol that helps you launch app chains as easily as possible. In the past years in crypto, we've seen a growing demand for app chains, right? Application-specific chains as opposed to using shared public chains like Ethereum. Developers want sovereignty, they want customizability, but traditionally it's difficult to launch a chain, right? There's a lot of infrastructure involved. The team has to take on a lot of infrastructural responsibilities like bootstrapping validators, attracting economic security to those validators, maintaining those nodes. And then you launch the chain and you need all these tools, right? Block explorers, wallets, indexers, RPC endpoints. So there's just so many things that go into it that, ultimately the time to market results in months. The energy required is very high. So with Tanssi, that's really what we're aiming to solve is, deploy a chain in minutes as opposed to months. And that's at a high level what we're doing.
Thiago, can you share a little bit about the growth that you had in terms of the ecosystem leading up to yesterday?
There are many angles to talk about growth, right? One of the cool things of Tanssi is that we managed to coordinate a bunch of stakeholders in the process. So we have, of course, the general community, we have builders, we have the node operators, and you're this kind of orchestration layer between all of that. You mentioned some of the highlights, right, Kelly, in the beginning. So we are very, very excited about this collab with Symbiotic and all the capital that we managed to attract to the vaults in the beginning. This is one of the key concepts we have always believed in Tanssi, right? So this shared security component. It's incredible. We achieved this $400 million mark. It's more TVL coming. We are working on new assets as well. Collabs with other protocols. So it's nothing but exciting to see like all the interest. It's a huge working trend in this capital markets. So we grew a lot in the RWA DeFi space. You mentioned LATAM. That's definitely one of the key regions where we are growing a lot.
Why do you think there's such a big growth for you in LATAM? Why has that been such a strong area for you?
Yeah, so I think in general, there is a lot going on in the fintech world in Brazil. I'm based in Brazil as well, so this helps, of course. We have our BD person is here. This massive growth of fintechs has always highlighted Brazil, right? So we have Nubank, we have many other giant fintechs. They're even becoming public, like having their IPOs and everything. When it comes to crypto specifically, many of those fintechs, they're exploring crypto rails to either make FX via stable coins or make more efficient payments, many different things. Credit as well, it's a huge chunk of the market. 1/3 of the Brazilian GDP runs into factoring operations every year. These are very liquid markets, very premium collaterals, and very juicy interest rates. So this combination makes it super, super interesting. And now with crypto rails, there are many teams that are just offering those very juicy operations to international investors using smart contracts, stablecoins. So there's a lot going on, and there are many cool opportunities. And also regulatory-wise, I think the Brazilian Central Bank and the Brazilian SEC have always been super open for innovation in general and competition, I have to say. The Brazilian market today is controlled by very few and large players. So I think the market's opening and the regulators are pro innovation in general. So these would be the main factors, I'd say.
And then just to add to that, I think like we've come to find from working on this thing why RWA projects and PayFi projects are interested in building chains, specifically through Tanssi, right? The app chain landscape in general is pretty competitive. There's several roll-up as a service providers. There's Caldera, Gelato, Conduit. On Avalanche, they have their Avalanche L1s. We've come to find that Tanssi enables unique properties in its chains that are well suited for all RWA and PayFi projects. The first one is fast finality, right? With roll-up as a service providers, the optimistic roll-up stack has poor finality properties. It's not necessarily worse or better. It's just about trade-offs. And with the op stack, you have slow finality. And a lot of these RWA and PayFi projects, they need to settle like thousands of transactions a day, right? So for them, this 1 week dispute period that the op stack has is not good enough. Whereas with Tanssi, you get finality in 10 seconds approximately. So that's a big kind of product differentiation. Another one is the customizability, right? With rollups, for the most part, you can deploy vanilla EVM app-specific rollups, but when it comes to customizing like the runtime of the chain, Tanssi chains are like a lot more customizable in that regard. And overall, the developer experience, right? For us, the developer experience is arguably the most important thing when building the product, right? This is the metric through which we use to optimize. And we've gotten feedback about this. When you compare Tanssi to more equivalent solutions, like Avalanche is a good example, right? It's more L1s as opposed to L2s that have for these rollups. Avalanche has fast finality, right? So like the properties of the chains of Avalanche are very similar to Tanssi, but when it comes to the developer experience, it's different. On Avalanche, for example, or other solutions, you have to bootstrap validators yourself. And then you need to take on the responsibility of attracting economic security to those validators, right? And these are not trivial things. For teams that need to bootstrap a chain, onboarding a diversified validator set is a lot of work. It takes months, right? And then attracting economic security in the shape of staked value to those validators is also work, right? And with Tanssi, we kind of abstract that stuff away. It's kind of a shared security model where we do the work of bootstrapping validators, attracting the economic security. We provide sequencers, everything in a fully permissionless way, so that you kind of can deploy these chains without compromising on decentralization, without compromising on developer experience as well. And we built kind of a nice UI. It makes it very developer friendly. So we've kind of found this vertical where we're organically getting traction for both the reasons Thiago mentioned in LATAM, BD, being there, the market is growing. plus kind of the product itself, right? There's kind of a combination of these things that we found has led to this traction.
If you can just top up with one thing, I think in bringing this more to our Ethereum world, Eigenlayer has done an amazing job by introducing this concept of restaking, which is the basis of our shared security model. And then, of course, Symbiotic has expanded that, and we eventually decided to make this collaboration with them. But one key element that was missing in this whole puzzle is really this convenience layer that Tanssi offers, right? So there is a restaking, but how to access this shared security? That's what we streamline in a codeless way. So right now it takes about 10 minutes, 5 steps. You just give some parameters about your own chain. We combine these parameters with the precompiled templates we have, and then we just bootstrap and maintain the chain. And I always highlight the maintenance aspect as well, because of course there's a reduction that's very considerable in the time to market when you are using Tansi's infrastructure, but also you are just abstracting away the maintenance of the chain in the long run. So teams also want to abstract and delegate that in a way that they can be just focused on their core business rules, how they make money, how they attract clients, instead of having a team that's dedicated full-time to maintain this, right? So that's something we can abstract away as well.
Great points, especially on sort of the comparison to the properties being similar, but the experience and the speed being different. We had Centrifuge on the podcast earlier this week. We've been talking about the inflection point that we're at for RWAs and more institutions. How important is it for some of these projects and institutions that they are understanding that they can build quickly and iterate? My underlying question is, like, how fast do you see them moving? How important is that speed factor?
Yeah, so definitely the institutions are coming. They came, right? They are here. There are many hurdles that need to be trespassed for these guys to actually start tractioning products in Web3. And I think one of them is exactly what we do. So we solve this key infrastructure management component that we just spoke about. So I think this works for both institutions and for other DGen use cases or more crypto native use cases as well. I'd say we are definitely seeing a lot of institutional capital coming to the markets. That's for sure. We see that here in Brazil. We see that all over the world. Institutional building, that's something that's still a little behind. And maybe the only reason why I'm saying that is because those things that are being actually built were not disclosed yet because of regulatory potential risks, right? And reputational risks. The recent movements we saw in the US, specifically Boston, this is going to be unlocking a lot of interesting stuff in the institutional side. When it comes to RWAs here in Brazil, at least, we see a lot of interesting things. So there's a company, for instance, our ecosystem that was accelerated by the Brazilian Stock Exchange. It's a company called BlockBR. So what I would say is that some institutions, they are testing RWA as an actual array, blockchain-enabled RWAs as an actual rail for settlement, for transactions, but they are exploring that. Like just to mention, there's Itaú, for instance, the biggest bank in Latam. They also acquired a stake in a tokenization company. So I think these experiments are coming through investments in our companies. I think though there's a lot being developed in-house as well. And the more we see this tractioning, the more we're going to see this rollout of these services. Also, when it comes to Tanssi and some use cases that we power, there is a lot of non-financial use cases that are super interesting as well. And in a sense, they are also RWAs. So, for instance, there are many companies that we are working on collabs with that are exploring governance systems. For instance, imagine if you could register all the clauses of a contract, a very complex contract that have many KPIs and many checkpoints. Imagine that you can just tokenize this contract and then measure your process with on-chain stamps, on-chain marks for governance. This is happening, and we are seeing a lot of interest for that. There's a big utility company that we are working with that has a POC in that direction. There's a big hospital here in Brazil as well that exploring stuff like that. So I think both in the financial use cases and on the non-financial use cases as well, we are seeing super exciting things, and I think this is going to be just evolving over time.
Francisco, now that MainNet is live, What does that mean? And what does that mean for Moondance Labs? And how do you keep iterating and building upon this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I was saying before, mainnet is really step one, right? That was kind of the first iteration of fulfilling Tansi's vision. It's taken several years to come to fruition, but it's finally here. And now it's rolling out new functionalities for the protocol. Right now, what's live is Tansi's L1, which at the end of the day, Tansi's L1 is purely used for orchestration, block production as a service, validating those blocks, providing shared security. And in the months to come, we're actually going to start onboarding team. We're going to start launching these app chains that are orchestrated by Tansi's L1. I think that's going to be the biggest focus moving forward is adoption. And I know that crypto Twitter has been having this debate between revenue and adoption. At least the way we look at it, there's so much competition right now that the team is going to be really focused on business development and growing the protocol, growing how many app chains are deployed on Tansi, the volumes that the Tansi protocol moves. So yeah, that's going to be the focus, is getting as many high quality teams on board as possible. And in large part, it relates to your previous question, Khalila, about speed and developer experience. I think a lot of these projects, institutional or not, it's difficult to debate the benefits that Web3 can offer in terms of capital efficiency, in terms of transparency. The problem that I see is tapping into the technology is extremely difficult. In the same way that in Web2, launching websites or building applications, you needed to handle all the infrastructure yourself. You needed to know software development. I think we're starting to see this transition in Web3 where moving more into kind of like a cloud-based era where you don't necessarily need to take on all those infrastructural responsibilities yourself. And I think the result of the developer experience improving dramatically will be more teams, right? More developers building products, more applications being built. And whether or not all those things will be successful, I doubt it, right? Like it's like the market is pretty brutal in general. Most teams fail, but I think Tansi's role within this whole story is making the developer experience so good and so easy to deploy chains that ultimately results in thousands of teams building on Tansi, right? And then the probability of finding these high quality teams also improves. But if the developer experience is so difficult that like it takes months and coordination of all these things that are not even part of your core business, the number of teams that are willing to go through that process is very limited. So then the funnel just becomes very limited as well as a consequence. So I think all of these things are going to be super important for us moving forward.
Do you think that the ecosystem growth comes from within crypto or outside of crypto as it is right now for Tanssi? We talk about new projects, new app chains, new teams, new developers. Are they already here or are they going to be new to Web3 when they come find Tanssi?
It is, and it should keep being like a combination of both, right? We all are here to bring more users to drive adoption. And we talk a little bit about these fintechs in Brazil. And one of the interesting, there's a conflicting, so to say, view on what these guys are building and traditional DeFi projects. Usually traditional DeFi projects, they are very concerned about liquidity fragmentation, for instance, right? That's one of the things that app chains introduce, and we have a bunch of ideas that we're exploring to mitigate this problem. But some of those projects, they don't really care about on-chain liquidity because they are bringing new liquidity on-chain. They are bringing new users, especially when it comes to these kind of Web 2.5 segment, as we say sometimes. They don't really care about that. So I would say we're gonna see a little bit of both, and I think that's healthy. Otherwise, we're just gonna go for this net zero game, which is not what we want. So hopefully, it's gonna be a combination of both.
Excellent. I think you also are doing a good job of bringing your community along with you. You had an airdrop that you did yesterday. Is that a one-time thing? Are there still opportunities for new entrants into the Tanssi ecosystem moving forward? Talk to us a little bit about the airdrop, how it went, and then where you see any of that going in the future.
Yeah, we have had airdrop different initiatives, right? We had incentivized testnet campaigns to kind of bootstrap community activity, and we've had 2 seasons of that. We had a final season leading up to MainNet as well. So the airdrop is happening right now. That's not to say that the foundation, I can't speak on behalf of the foundation, but like that's not to say that there won't be campaigns in the future. I think this is where Web3 is challenging. You have to juggle a lot of very specific things, and you have to have very specific knowledge about different things. It's not only about protocol development, which is already in and of itself like extremely complex when building something like Tanssi from a product standpoint, but also combining that with ecosystem development or business development and bringing on these teams and at the same time community, right? And balancing those things is not easy. And with Web3, we've seen in the past years kind of the performance hasn't been great for a lot of altcoins. So community tends to get wrecked a lot of times. And that's something that we've tried to think for Tanssi. How do we create community alignment? That's why the community sale that the foundation hosted several months ago is at the same valuation as like the second round that Moondance Labs held, to try to get the community in at the same valuation as previous investors. These types of initiatives to try to create as much community alignment as possible, because the community in Web3 is incredibly important. This is one of the reasons why I like this industry. It's a lot more important than in Web2.
Yeah, I'd say like when we have the foundation, of course, we have a lot of ideas and a lot planned for the days and months to come. As Suzuka said in the beginning, this is not the finish line. This is just the beginning. So we have a lot planned. The last milestone specifically that we went through intensity, we call Journey to Mainnet, right, Kelly? I think that's the one you mentioned in the beginning. So that was incredible. And by the way, a big shout out to our marketing team who executed that super well. So we grew from 90K followers to over 150K. I think now it's around 160K. So that was a massive growth. And we try to be as close as possible to the community always. And we try to be in podcasts. We try to meet people in person sometimes as well, interact using these campaigns and just having a chat, right? So yeah, the community can expect a lot of cool things coming up. And yeah, it's very, very exciting to see like all this growth recently.
Second that on the shout out to your marketing team. Kathy has been fantastic. The team has been driving it for the past 8 or 10 months. I've had a blast engaging and collaborating and seeing her in the field and in action. So great job there. Let's just quickly on the token. Can you talk to us about what listings were like? You had a bunch of them, including Kraken, Binance, Gate.io, and a number of others. What was the process like and how did that go for you? You know, you're 24, 36 hours out now. I think Tanssi ranked third on Binance Futures yesterday or today, which is very impressive for a new ecosystem. Talk to us a little bit about market interest and listing process.
Yeah, sure. I think that's where most of the lessons learned are on my side, at least. So, and by the way, the key takeaway I would give to other builders is that you should plan everything you can, but just be sure that things can change until last minute. So be ready, embrace the change, and just be flexible because really sometimes some things just happen like less than 24 hours before the launch. We managed to be super flexible in all the verticals of the company, marketing, legal, financial, foundation. So everybody was pretty flexible. You should plan, but you should also be sure that things will change. So when it comes to the listing, we were super happy to have this collaboration with Binance. I'd say from the futures market, we had, of course, Binance, which is massive. But we also had Bybit, KuCoin, BitGet has also enabled futures market. For the spot, we had Kraken, as I said, BitGet, Maxi, which has a bunch of top tier exchanges. That took a lot of time to cut all these deals and just to interact with all these people. But yeah, I would say it was a success. We also always, we are big fans of decentralization, right? So we couldn't launch a token without having also a decentralized pool. That's something we managed to get as well. So we have our pool in Uniswap, a lot of venues for people to trade, permissionless or permission. Happy what we did in the launch.
Congratulations.
Yeah, exchange listings are challenging. This is it relates back to like what I said before, that crypto kind of encompasses a very broad spectrum of knowledge bases that you need to have to make it successful. And I've seen a lot of teams that don't put a lot of value or importance on some things like centralized exchange listings, for example, and that ends up being detrimental to the project. It's tough. It's gotten more tough over the years. The competition in crypto has grown substantially, right? So it just becomes more and more challenging to stand out to the market. I would recommend to teams to really think about that stuff. We were preparing that for basically 2 years or a year and a half. So I would strongly recommend to teams that are looking to launch a token to have kind of like an exchange strategy or from early on, because it does take a lot of time to execute on that strategy and to meet their requirements.
To even meet all these people, building the relationships, that's extremely important. Like, don't never underestimate that. So having those contacts, and you just don't build all these relationships in like 2 weeks or even 2 months, right? So it's a long road, and the more you prepare, the better.
Excellent. I was going to ask for advice because I know there's lots of projects trying to figure out when to do this, how to do this, how to get started. So appreciate the advice sharing. From a timing perspective, you did this just after ECC, which was pretty strong this year. I wouldn't say it's alt season, but there's a lot of traction and a lot of good things going on across the market, crypto ecosystem, tailwinds from regulatory environment here in the US. And you managed to do this before the Pump.Fun token launch this weekend. What do you think about timing? What does it look like for the rest of the year for Tanssi?
Yeah, so I think timing is like one of the key elements for any launch, right? I think, of course, we are here for the long run, and we shouldn't spend a lot of time just trying to time the market like super precisely, because those who are in crypto for long enough, they know that's impossible to perfectly time the market. But definitely, like, I think we were super fortunate to have this very strong moment to launch the token. And I think, like, the very first days of trading, the very first hours, and yeah, it's really you start to form your market, and so your addressable market of traders. So I'd say having a lot of work being done before, of course, but also like the time, the actual moment when you launch, that's going to be impacting your project for forever, right? The chart's never going to change. So it's very hard to time the market, but yeah, I think we were fortunate enough to launch in a good timing.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams or founders spend a lot of time on this area. How do we perfectly time our launch, or is the timing for our product correct? I tend to think that people put too much importance on that, and that like in the end, there's no way you can possibly control it. So like if you are lucky with the timing, sure, that's great. But in my opinion, you should just launch as soon as possible. Try to get validation from the market in terms of what you're building, and if you're really in it for the long term, I think that's the best way to play it, because the sooner you launch, the sooner you can get feedback, the sooner you can iterate and take it from there. So yeah, at least that's how I look at it.
Great. Well, listen, congrats to both of you, both the Tanssi Foundation and Moondance Labs. Moondance for bringing this to life, Tanssi for getting MainNet and TGE out. Huge week for you both. Really appreciate you coming and joining us here today.
Thanks a lot for having us. Arrington Capital has been a very early supporter in the project. You guys have been early believers, so really appreciate all the help that you've given us. And look out for Tanssi. We'll continue to make waves in the years to come. So thanks again for having us, Kelly.
Thiago,
Thank you so
Francisco,
much, Kelly.
thank you so much.